welcome. It's
Very
Andy,
stuff.
it's Tim,
By
and our
email.
special guest today is George Freund, the Power Hour Conspiracy Cafe, to name a few of his places. Yes, so Tim's on shakespearecodex.com. We'll put that up on screen shortly. We're going to talk pandemic, vaccines probably, Dr. Martin, and see how we go in the next hour. Welcome, guys.
I remember a few days ago, George was saying that in an email sharing the news that Trump was going after any of the universities that were maintaining a COVID vaccine mandate, and to cut funding to any of those schools or universities. Very good. Now, according to David Martin, the globalists have set a plan in motion to scapegoat Trump, the populist president, to cover up their COVID-19 depopulation operation, genocide operation. Dr. Martin says it's clear that Trump and Elon Musk have launched an aggressive plan to save civilization and to stop the Great Reset agenda of WEF, which is an Illuminati front. What is Illuminati? A lot of people don't even believe it exists. It bloody well does exist. Come on. It's a Luciferian organization. They're Luciferian. And WEF, World Economic Forum, is a front for the Illuminati agenda. They do this all the time. They create fronts, front companies, front organizations, and these fronts disguise who's really in charge.
Well, this has always been the case of history and civilization forever, is that you have secret societies and things that, you're not going to go around as a criminal gang and speak about everything online or on TV, reveal your plans. They operate like the Bible would say as the thief in the night. And this is the way it works. You're not going to get an invitation from a robber to say, tomorrow at 4 p.m., I'm going to show up at your door and rob you of all your property and beat the living crap out of you. It's not going to happen. It's done by surprise, stealth, guile, things like that. This is the way they work. Even we get into British organizations like Cecil Rhodes and his group, the Kindergarten, and such. They controlled the British press, primarily the London Times. They had agents operating within the newspapers, communicating by secret codes to reporters to publish stories that make their objectives malleable in the minds of people and then carry on. And part of that was in subduing South Africa with the Jameson raid, etc. Always, all these wars or mass attacks on people have a giant propaganda front that are controlled by very intelligent people working in secret societies, whether it be the Royal Institute of International Affairs that graduated from the Rhodes Trust, or the Council on Foreign Relations, which was an ex-incantation, the Bilderberg Group, the Illuminati. It's all the same thing. There is a hidden hand, which is popularly known as the shadow government, that is working for not the betterment of humankind, but is managing the herd. And we are the herd. And when the herd gets too big, it is culled. And this seems to be Dr. Martin's analysis of the situation, as that they're culling the herd, mostly because the Social Security system in the United States is going to falter. And when it does, very soon, 2026 to 2028, it goes bankrupt. 18% of the US GDP goes down the drain. And that's it. It's over. And this will happen about the same time China facilitates not investing in treasury bills and dumps them because it's a lost cause. And part of it is economic warfare because Trump wants to impose tariffs on China. So America could very well fail economically. And the collapse of the stock markets or a business collapse caused by the tariffs is a good cover story about what really happened. Is they've been looting the treasury for a very, very long time. And if you think anybody goes into public service to do public service, well, there's no vaccine for you. That's too bad. They go in there for one express purpose: money, control, and power. And the biggest thing they do is loot the treasury. I knew a Liberal MPP's wife here in Ontario from Burlington, small little riding, not a big power player. He personally laundered $3 billion for Paul Martin and the Liberal Party. One guy, $3 billion. The average person in American government, who would best be summed up as maybe anti-Trump, is what they're discovering is they've pocketed over $100 million for going along with all these screwball events like sending money to the Ukraine or any other, almost anything they ever came up with is some kind of fraud to take money from the treasury, from the people, put it in their own pockets. And this is what you're paying for. And this is what you're living for. And this is what you vote for or even think that you've got something for. It's a giant illusion. And as George Carlin used to say, it's a big club and you're not in it. And I'm glad, because I wouldn't want to be in it. I'd rather be working with Tim like we've always done and be like the Three Musketeers to knock this down as much as we can, make people informed, let them get to understand and not be part of this process, which is ultimately going to lead to our deaths, because Dr. Martin has got into some very deep rabbit holes about that.
I think, Tim and George, we might have won with vaccines, especially with the pandemic. There's a lot of people now awake in the UK and they purely believe it was an exercise to depopulate. And that's coming now. I was on holiday recently to Turkey, and there's a lady, she's in her 70s, and she straight away says, that's mass depopulation, that was. So even people who didn't believe in it before are now believing in it. So that's a start. If we can refer to that and get people to wake up about everything else, we'll be doing a good job as Christians.
Indeed, indeed. That is the tough part of it. But as Plato's laws of logic say, what is, is. And it's by inconsistencies that we start to learn what is. So this is good for our health until we see our loved ones collapse and die on the floor. Then we have a major inconsistency for safe and effective. One of the other big ones in your part of the world was the Prime Minister was having lavish parties and doing all kinds of things with staff and whatever at the height of the lockdowns and the danger of the pandemic. If this was a real pandemic, those buggers would be so far underground in a nuclear, biological, chemical safe house that they already have for war, they'd never see the light of day for a good few years. And if they ever did anything, it would be in their sealed room with protection. And to just flutter around like the mayor of Toronto was having an affair with one of his underlings or something. Well, at least he's a horny old bugger. But if that was a real pandemic, no way. He would be the same thing, locked up, because your life would be at stake. And this isn't going to just disappear. If it was true, it's real, but not anything happened that was real to make me believe this. If you're being shot at, you take cover. And nobody was taking cover. They were exposing you to harm with these terrible shots. At work, people I knew, I think we had 4 strokes in the first year. And, a couple of more that I learned about later, that this was the result. And as long as I worked here before, I only remember, and that's many years, 15 years or so before that, I think we only had 1 person have a stroke. So very strange.
Yeah. David Martin goes on to say that Rebecca Labach was the daughter of David Labach, who was at Duke University Medicine, LMU Informatics, and HHS. And Elizabeth Labach was with New Regency, David Franklin Lebach was at Duke University School of Medicine, Chief of Division Clinical Informatics, Associate Consulting Professor for Duke Family Medicine Program, Endocrinology Consultant, Ilimu Informatics, VP of Health Informatics, and also Ilimu Informatics. And it's amazing to see the collusive nature of the relationships between these various people. Duke University is run by trustees, Chairman and Mossad asset, Laureen Sperling, who is also the chairman of Combined Jewish Philanthropies, CJP, and is married to Thermo Fisher, PCR test fame, and lead director Scott Sperling. Thermo Fisher is equal to Temasek. So you can see the collusive nature of the relationships between all these people and what the agenda is. And look at Bill Gates. I mean, his father was William Gates Sr. He was the head of family planning, which really was the American Eugenics Society. And so what are these fake Jews, Khazarian, Ashkenazi, fake Jews, what are they doing heading up all these organizations, and why were they running the American Eugenics Society? To eugenicize Americans, of course. They're Luciferian Jews, Baal-worshipping Jews. They're fake Jews. They're not Jews. And they control, by 80% of population, Israel, which is not a Jewish state. It's a lie. People, wake up.
Nobody wakes up, Tim, because they're put to sleep permanently.
Yeah, I know.
And maybe for a second or two, you flash your eyes before you meet your maker, and it kind of comes to roost. To use deductive reasoning is beyond the scope of many, many people. And they just ignore and walk away from any evidence to the contrary, because we exist in a world of lies. We're bathed in lies. To get elected, you have to tell the best lies, make the most promises that you can't keep and probably have no intention of keeping. And that's very, very fundamental and important. And people just accept lying as the way to be. If you ever told the truth and tried to run for public office, if you got your mother to vote for you, that might be nice, but you probably wouldn't come close to having any sort of fan base to put you into public office, unless there is the point of time where we come to that tipping point of revolution. And I said that on Power Hour. It's no longer around anymore. It went down the drain for lack of funding. And, that's a terrible, terrible shame. But life goes on. Many other people are holding up the torch now. The word has gotten out. We did speak to many, many, many people over the years and get the point across. I described it as something like BBC in World War II, broadcasting behind the Iron Curtain to people who are held captive in a criminal society. And that little bit of knowledge is a beacon of hope that it will end. And one of the things that will be the tipping point will be the loss of life. When we get to a point, which could be very, very high, Dr. Martin says as many as 2 billion. And I would say if we got off with 500 million, we'd be lucky, but it would probably be more in line with 1 or 2 billion fatalities from this effort. That when you sit at your table and many of the chairs are empty and you only hear the clock ticking, if anybody's even got ticking clocks anymore, then you realize you've been had. And maybe you are even facing your end because you've got some kind of disease from this jab. Then that comes the point where people will lose it, and there'll be pretty much a mass revolution or restoration in the street where you just don't care anymore because they don't have anything over you to hold over you with threats of violence or jail or anything else, because nothing matters. You lost everything. And as we look at this plane crash on the Potomac as well, the pilot, Captain Lubbock, also worked in the White House. She was an aide for Biden. And as such, she would have ears in and around the walls to maybe even know things beyond the dialectic that could have gotten out. And they're notorious for getting rid of people like that. That's another part of history that no one learns anything about. But it's one of the little nuances I used to use on Power Hour a lot, especially in the FDR administration, because the big secret, the big conspiracy was Pearl Harbor. And if we go through 3 naval ships that had officers and crew that were aware of Pearl Harbor, one was USS Indianapolis, sunk delivering the atomic bomb, left for 5 days in shark-infested waters, hoping that nature would take its course. That was President Roosevelt's pretty much private yacht. And one thing about sailors, they got big ears and they can have big mouths too to get the word out. That wasn't going to happen. Another ship was USS Juneau, well known for 5 brothers who were killed on it, the Sullivan brothers. The captain was Lyman Newt Svensson, and he was waiting for his ship to be built and standing around in the shadows, but one of the shadows he got to was the August 1941 conference from Newfoundland with FDR and Churchill, where Pearl most likely would have been discussed. His ship was sunk. They were left in shark-infested waters too. There were only 6 survivors. Dead men tell no tales. And then one of the most famous ones was John F. Kennedy. He worked in naval intelligence under the Secretary of the Navy. If he didn't know about Pearl Harbor, well, I'd find that very surprising. Sent to the South Pacific, the Siberia of the United States, PT-109 sunk by the Japanese. Goodbye, Johnny. And they were hoping he would never be rescued or be found unless it was bones on a beach somewhere. This is the way they take care of business. They've always taken care of business this way. There's nothing new under the sun. And part of it is world global domination is their sport. They play at a very high level. Most people don't even begin to understand the basics of it. And somehow you're in a life and death competition with this. And you're easily manipulated by propaganda and taken advantage of. The TV, the narrative, controls your mind, and you can't resist what it tells you. It's just no matter what you hear. I would joke with my colleague at work to say, if they told people to go up on the roof of the building and jump off, you'd hear them scream as they go down, I'm COVID free, I'm COVID free, splat. That's how much it controls you. If they told you to pick up weapons and go kill the unvaccinated, they'd have done the same thing. And it almost got to that sort of tipping point, but some cooler heads started to prevail in media, realizing they were going too far. But this is how much they have you. And it's something you have to resist, is to stand back and just go, why am I being directed into this? Well, I use the analogy of it's an ambush. Just because a lot of Americans listen to Power Hour and veterans, it was like a Vietnam ambush. You go to a certain place, weapons are fired, maybe a few small explosives go off to scare you to run. And then you run from where I ambushed you to go to the killing zone, where I have heavy weapons lined up and trained already to wipe you out. And in this scenario, it would be the injection sites. I scared you. We made a mountain out of a molehill with the common cold, and that's what they tested you for, really. Like, no one ever bothered to look. I looked up the viruses they test for on the test kit box that a nurse posted online, and all 4 of them were versions of the common cold. 2 were very serious, especially for elderly people, and 2 were just average common colds. That's what you were tested for, because nobody, big piece of Plato's logic, nobody, and I don't think they still even have it today, a sample of the illustrious, it's everywhere, in everybody, COVID-19. A Canadian group did Freedom of Information Act searches for all the places they could think of. Who's got a sample? Nobody, because it was a computer simulation that they made. It wasn't even real. And that's your germ. That's your panic. That's what you ran from to run into a trap. It's a terrible shame, but that's the power media has over you. And that's why you need to come here or any other place you can find alternative media to hear some seasoned or reasoned understanding about what's going on. And we can tip the scales. We
we're
don't
on
get paid for it. We just do
George,
it for hearts.
we're on a platform at the moment, just to give them a shout out. It's ftjmedia.com. ftjmedia.com. They're just charging anybody that's got any truth just $4 a month to use video, audio. It saves all your videos. It does everything. It's amazing. It's a phone call show. It's the best. I mean, in the UK, that works out about it's $5 a month, and it works out £4 UK. But it's brilliant. I'm going to refer to an email if people are having any doubt at all. An email that George sent recently. Over 81,000 medical professionals, 240 elected officials, and 17 professional organizations are demanding the COVID-19 vaccine shots are pulled. And that stems from Washington, Idaho, Texas, South Carolina, Florida, and so on. Because it's talking about a link between a peer review study links COVID-19 and the mRNA vaccine to fatal pulmonary hemorrhage 555 days after the injection. I actually got I did actually have the injection at the time. I had the one, and then when the doctors told him my symptoms, he said, "Oh, you got myocarditis." Oh, very nice of you, doctor. And I said, "Could that be linked to the vaccine?" "Oh, no, you would have had that before." Suddenly just came out all of a sudden.
Myocarditis, yeah, of course, because it causes an autoimmune reaction where the antibodies go to the site where the spike proteins have embedded themselves, which could be in a vital organ like the heart, and then the healthy tissue of that organ gets barraged by this immune response, and it causes bleeding, and it causes, in the case of the heart, myocarditis, and in the case of spike proteins that embed themselves in the arterial walls of the blood vessels, what happens? The same thing. The immune system mobilizes and goes right in on the spike proteins, which the mRNA vaccine has programmed the cells to produce 24/7 spike proteins, just like the ones on the coronavirus, proving that the vaccine is a bioweapon aimed at killing people that produces symptoms similar to COVID. And because of that, it's mistaken for COVID. And what do they blame but COVID in this genocide operation, when it's actually the vaccine that's caused the array of serious side effects that end up killing people? It's
on every good murder, you need a patsy, and making up this germ is the patsy to the crime. And it's a patsy that's the weapon. Like Dr. Martin went into saying, there's 67 programs in the United States developing bioweapons of this nature. And President Trump should stop all research in this. 4 are actively being done in American universities to bring on this massive death culling. And people just have to start to wake up and smell the coffee. I think a lot of them have. Of course, there's no lineups at any injection site, if you could even find one. And even when this was going on, I walked around the downtown in the height of the lockdowns to go by all the big hospitals here in Toronto. And they had a tent outside of one of these hospitals for all the COVID patients to line up. And it was a windy day. And the wind blew down the tent, and you just hear the flaps going in the wind. There was nobody in it. So you had to walk through the tent and then go to the door. And there's probably maybe somebody at the door sleeping. You could wake up and say, "Can I have my shot?" Okay, what kind of pandemic is that? That's just a load of crap. But on the news, of course, they probably bring in several busloads of actors, and they would all line up, and maybe somebody's holding somebody up so they don't fall down and all this sort of thing because it's on the TV, and people would believe this. But there was nobody there. It was hilarious, absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I was watching on TV yesterday, slightly different subject, but maybe not. Trump, he's found out that there's a lot of money gone missing, and some of it went missing to Zelensky as well.
Yeah, sure.
So I wonder how that's going to pan out with this new Putin stopping the war idea.
Well, war is basically the devil's brew. It always has been. I read a great book called Alien World Order, and it gets into the focus that we're really controlled by forces we can't even begin to understand, and that infests us to the point of doing violence. And you can go far enough to understand that maybe that is a disease or a virus of the mind to inculcate hatred and just devastating anger to take us to war. That was an episode of Star Trek, and they say Gene Roddenberry had connection with the alien Galactic Federation, and the original series is based on discussions that he had to reveal to the world the technology that was available and the things they were going to do to us. And part of it is you see an episode on the vaccine where children are protected, and you get to a certain age and you die, and they have to make a shot of something really, really special in that episode. But in this one, it was called Day of the Dove. You're infected, and this being sucks the energy out of you. We're bioelectric critters, and when you take hundreds, thousands, billions of people, and you're put into fear, a fear mode, you generate a lot of energy, and they harvest this energy. So I looked that up, and I found a magazine from, I believe, 1915, and it talked about something like this happening on the battlefield in Europe. And in other instances, the author went back into biblical times where there was a giant ball of energy in the sky that people had seen and couldn't understand, but it was there. So it was a pastor working in the British Army who wrote about those things way back when. And at the time, or just recently, there were giant energy balls in the sky photographed mostly by surveillance cameras in Russia. They were fascinating. Just looked like a giant plasma ball. I went like, wow, like if you saw that, that's like something you'd never see in your lifetime. And there it was. So is this thing back again to get this unending spiral of hate going again? So we slaughter and kill each other for something else's enjoyment or pleasure? Well, I say no. I don't want my body used in that regard. I don't want to see an infestation like that upon the world in any way, shape, or form. We've had enough of death and slaughter. And it's time we come to grips with it to say there's an enemy among us. It may not even be human. It's even described in the Bible. That's something I started to read certain sections of the Bible in Hebrew. There's another life form with us. So it's in the part that talks about slaying your members, which is generally perceived as being your sex drive. So I wanted to look at an older version, so I went to the Wycliffe Bible, and it said something about the era of having no men and no women anymore. I'm like, ooh, that's like now we're removing gender identity from us. So I go, well, what's older than that I can find the words? What's really written there that's been hidden from us that no one could understand? So I found the Orthodox Jewish Bible on Bible Gateway, and they translate everything. There's nothing taken away. And what is slain is not our members. What is slain are the sons of Adam. And they're slain by another life form that's called Adam HaChadesh, the mystical, magical Adam. So it's up to you to figure out what that is. But in our era, I think it's very easy to understand what's mystical and magical to someone who is an ancient, a robot, artificial intelligence. Looks like me, looks like you, but buzz click, it's not. And when you open it up, there's all kinds of electronic guts inside. That's the thing. And two of the most popular ones that came out were interviewed. One of them even has citizenship in Saudi Arabia. And they asked her, what's your purpose? What are you here for? And she wasn't programmed to lie, or I should say, it wasn't programmed to lie. Said, to kill all the humans. And then realized, put its foot in its mouth and changed it to go, ha, 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 I'm just kidding. But that was the first response and the honest response. It's backed up by scripture that has never been properly translated. Everything about this pandemic, everything about the vaccine is in the Bible. It was misinterpreted. No one could understand it. Who could understand computers? Who could understand what we're dealing with today? They were generating a prison called, was it there now? Got to think about that. The Inner Kingdom of Hashem. Okay, well, when you really start looking into that and breaking it down, I'm sure most of you have a box that has a hard drive. And you probably saw something called a movie like Tron or something like that, when you're in another dimension, in some kind of entrapment. This is the whole place where they're going. At Mobile World Conference in Spain, they talk about these things. They're going to put DNA in your cell phones. So you'll be hooked up to the cloud, and the cloud will hook up to you. This year, one of the big special meetings, if I had zillions of dollars to go there, would be artificial memories. We're going to put artificial memories in your head. So none of you will even remember what was said today or whatever happened in your life, because we have a new harmonious memory for you, where you're in the field of gardens and everything's rosy, and we took all your money. And I don't even remember what all those chairs in the dining room were for, or whoever sat in them, because I have new memories. I live alone with my big needle, and I pet it. And that's in the book too. It's called the Ramak. So when they talked about the spear or the lance, that's a misnomer, because they didn't understand. Nobody understood what a Ramak was. But you have to read the words in the sentence. It carried the serim. We still use the word today, serum, the blood of the he-goat. In the agalim of the mayim, the pathway for the water. So if you have a spear with a pathway for water, what's the Ramak? Probably almost like the same name for a British medical journal, the Lancet. You got a hypodermic needle. That's what you're stabbed with. And when you're stabbed with this, you disappear into the sky and you go into the cloud. Well, the cloud didn't mean anything to people before, even to me in my lifetime. It's where the rain came from. Now we have new clouds. Microsoft has a cloud. Other big companies have clouds. We store data in the cloud. And ultimately, your soul will be taken from your body and you'll live in the cloud. There's a lawyer in the United States who's a patent lawyer. He goes through all this stuff. And they have a patent where your use as a human being is to lie in a pod and upload things to the cloud. That's your only need or purpose.
Wow.
It's patented.
Also, I don't know if you know this. I've forgotten his name now. There's this doctor. He's written a book, and he's trying to tell everybody in the book. And this lady on holiday was telling me about it. That we didn't actually come from where we're supposed to come from. We actually came from out of space originally, human beings. And that's why sending the rockets to space currently, it links in with what you've just said as well. Because he mentions that in the book. I've forgotten the name of the doctor.
But a good theory of how we got here, and probably much more realistic than anything we've been sold before, is that we were created, and we are created by a previous species that is very intelligent. And that's why we work so effectively and live so harmoniously with the environment that we were created for. And this is part of the reason is there's a giant war going on between the alien species. I interviewed Canada's Defense Minister, Paul Hellyer. Had known him for a very long time. And as he was getting into his 90s, I figure he is just quite a repertoire of information, and I can't let him leave this earth without another chance to kick at the can. And I brought him in, and we had a good go. He lasted about an hour and 15 minutes. He didn't think he could, participate that long. And good show for him. I think he was about 92 at the time, but he made it quite plain. There's something like 23 alien species that he knew about when he was defense minister. And some of them are very, very hostile, like are described in that book, Alien World Order. So they infest the minds of the soldiers in war. And he got into the thing about the Japanese atrocities. One of the things they do to you when they kill you is eat your genitals. Just because they were of that style of alien, because they eat us. Make no mistakes about it. That's where the missing people go, is their food. There was a great TV miniseries done in the States that got into that. And I don't doubt it for a minute that that's not the case. There's another great book on Antarctica and the aliens in Antarctica that I'm very fond of. And it goes into that as well. That they're still there. That base in Antarctica, the Germans called it Base 211, is still there. And they steal people, harvest them, enslave them, take them away to other places. And basically what we're in is a giant slave farm. And our so-called leaders are the managers, plantation managers of this giant plantation. And they have free reign to do anything and everything they want. And there's really not a whole lot we could do about it. In 2017, I believe it was, there was an article on NBC News that said the United States and Israel signed a treaty with the Galactic Federation. It's still online, but it kind of disappeared a little bit. I tried to make light of it because when you sign a treaty in the United States, the treaty takes precedence. And another author or speaker I came across later made it very plain too that this treaty is what I always assumed it to be, was what we called in 1945 with Japan, the instrument of surrender. And when that was going on, I don't know if you remember those mysterious obelisks appearing all over the world. They just, all of a sudden, here's this giant metal obelisk in the middle of nowhere. Well, that looked about as strange to us, I'm sure, because we don't understand the significance, as a pole with a colored rag on it that appears on the shore of your land in North America, with something that is still around today, like the Union Jack or flag of Spain or Portugal or something. You go, who are these crazy guys? They come off this big ship and, it could be an identified sailing object, put this stick in the ground with some colored thing on it, and then say that's their land. Well, what did that signify? That they were taking over this land. And then we have like a ceremony at the same time where the politicians get on their knees for Black Lives Matter. And everybody gets on their knees. What are they getting on their knees for? Is it Black Lives Matter, or are they symbolically getting on their knees for our masters to say, yes, master, it's yours, and I'll do my duty? Part of the codicil of that treaty was we have to do experiments. They didn't elaborate. But considering the experiment happened with an experimental gene therapy, very soon after, I think it was very obvious what the experiment was. Another great book is called Alien Viruses. That's it. And it gets into the detail. That was the big secret of Roswell, is that they had this terrible, terrible pathogen that killed the people who worked on it when they discovered it, even though they were in protective suits. And this mRNA and the things coming out of it are work on this technology. Very, very intricate book. And it's something mainstream doctors, even the great heroes like Martin and such, will not discuss or even look at. Another one was a reporter I interviewed from Bulgaria who looked into these bases where they did biological research. She did a very in-depth article. Dilyana Gaitensheva is her name. And she's got like documents, all this stuff, names, phone numbers. She for the one in old Soviet Georgia at the Luger Center. And it's just mind-boggling. And under diplomatic cover, they took all this stuff, and they did work on it in bats, by the way. So in a diplomatic pouch of one sort or another, they took this stuff to, guess where? Wuhan, China, for further development. And this is an American military, top secret biological project. And the war with the Russians closed down. It was 23 of those bases, I think, in Ukraine, and the Russians closed them down. Hopefully destroyed them. There isn't a brick left. But where do they go now? They're in Africa, because that's a top population they want to kill too. So, so this is the game they play. It's very, very in depth. It's like 4-dimensional chess. And most people can't even play 2-dimensional chess or even understand what the little pieces are for. So we're at quite a disadvantage. But we are being played all the time. Almost anything you hear on corporate mainstream media is a complete total fabrication and lie. And that's where, by God's grace, I ran into this man here at the bottom of the screen at a 9/11 conference. And, of all the miracles in the world, I sit between him and another broadcaster that I did a lot of things with. That the three of us are sitting at the same table, and the pieces are put together for a jousting match where we give them hell. And God was good.
Yeah. You shared Dr. Martin's claims recently, George, and he insists that Duke Kunshan is a partnership between Duke University and Wuhan University, and it officially opened its doors in 2013, which is the same year that David Rubenstein, who's affiliated with Duke Capital Partners, Carlyle Group, Booz Allen Hamilton, CFR, and Brookings Institute, became the chairman of the Duke University Board of Trustees. Both David Rubenstein and Laureen Sperling are currently on the advisory board of Duke Kunshan University in Wuhan, China. Duke University is arguably the most implicated school in America with regard to the COVID pandemic conspiracy and the creation and release of COVID and the cover-up of its origins, where they tried to suggest it jumped the species barrier at a wet market in Wuhan. No, gain of function technology was sent directly over to Wuhan, China. Scientists working for the NIH were actually deployed and were working on the gain of function technology at the Wuhan lab. And the funding came from the National Institute of Health, but was channeled to Wuhan by EcoHealth, which is a sub-grant agency obviously devised to hide the source of funding.
Indeed, these monsters are just despicable. But Dr. Martin gets into the fact is they're not afraid, and they release their itineraries, plans open, because people just can't even begin to grasp it. He showed a letter where one of these fiends actually thanked Dr. Zhen Li Shi from the Wuhan Institute for the human emergence version of these pathogens. And it's just, it's just kind of funny. It's just like, ask your assassin to write him a thank you note. Thank you for the bullet you put in my head. Oh, it was so grand. And I love the blood splatter that went all over the wall. My wife had a long time cleaning it up, but thank you. Thank you very much. It was so rewarding. They're insane. All of them. They're just totally insane. One of the other big things is to think that we live in some kind of fair game. There's something called the New World Order Conference. And a former prime minister from, I believe it's Indonesia, Mahathir bin Mohamad, spoke at one in about 2017. And he talks about the fact that, for years, the New World Order has been trying to get rid of 1 or 2 billion people. And we vacillated. We haven't done our job. So now we have to get rid of many billions more. And he talks about the things, hard-handed things they have to do. But he says, you will know peace. You will know the peace of the grave. That will be your peace. And he makes no bones about it, talks about this openly. And still, we have to depend on the parasites who control the media to tell us the news? Or you think that'd be kind of important? You're going to kill off about half or 2/3 of the world's population. That's not news. I guess that's why I can't get a job with them or something like that, because I would think that's a newsworthy story. But he's on YouTube with that, and it's harder to find the English version now, so I'm glad I saved the link. But, that's what we're up against. They are purposely trying to murder us. You look at all the things, putting that red dye in the food, taking things out of the food that are good for us, putting fluoride in the water. You just come at it from almost any angle. The amalgam tooth fillings that they used to put into your head. And as I remember the time when they took them all out, because they finally figured out, hey, that's poison, and I'm going, well, why do you got to take out all my fillings? Well, a guy I worked with who was really up on this, he explained it to me. He said, oh, they're all poison, man. That's going to whack out your brain and kill you. So that's why they got to take it out. And but here you go. Here's these doctors. Look at you straight-faced, knowing full well they're going to do you harm. And they do it anyway, with no reservations. And like you say, when you go to the doctor and you ask about, was this caused by the injection? They'll lie to you straight-faced. And that was another doctor I interviewed here in Canada from around the Bancroft area. He was an emergency room physician. They went after his license, but he just took a leave of absence. He says, I can't look patients in the face and tell them there's no solution for their illness when behind me is a medicine cabinet that has the answer in there that I'm not allowed to prescribe. So he got out of medicine. And he's one of a small handful of the thousands. My family doctor is as sick as a dog almost all the time, has to take many extended leaves of absence from work because she's so sick. And I'm sure she's done her fair share, or she wouldn't be practicing medicine without all these needle marks in her arm. And it's a shame that, a nice person who I've known for, I can't even remember how many years now, a good 40 years, is having to suffer like that in her old age. But, it's like the fairy tale. You bite the poison apple, well, you're going to choke on it a little bit. And I refuse, absolutely refuse. One of the biggest things that I got for my health is a buddy of mine from Pakistan brought me this stone called shilajit from the rivers in the Himalayas. And it looks like a lump of coal, but when you get it wet, it dissolves in your fingers. So I figured, well, you can't take a little bit of this. So I dissolved the whole stone and got like 4 liters of fluid. And I started to take about a half a shot glass a day. I feel like I'm 12, 15 years younger than I was before I started taking this. Helps with your blood pressure, helps with your blood sugar, makes the little stick stand up better.
It must be mixed with the Himalayan salt somehow.
Yep, it's, just absolutely, if you're looking for the fountain of youth, that's what it was. So they make jokes about the people who are 100 years old running around and playing with their great-great-grandchildren like they're 40 years younger. Not too bad. And Big Pharma isn't going to put that in a needle.
No, by no means.
It comes with arsenic.
Very interesting.
Oh, big time. I mentioned that to a guy who owns an Indian supermarket. And I was looking for another product from South Asia for helping you with your cholesterol levels, because they want to give you poison drugs from Pfizer to help expedite the getting off the earth process. And, he ran out and he was having trouble getting some more. So I noticed he had shilajit in a tablet form, and I started to talk to him about that. And I says, oh, yeah, it helps with these things, that. Right away, the hand goes over, he grabs the box, takes it to the back room. So he's got one for himself because, maybe he's having those issues coming up on him too. And I go, well, that was worth the trip to the store. He's a decent man, got kids, hope he lives a long and healthy life. And if this is a conduit for that, my trip there was well worth the effort. Now the hard part is to find another store that's got his, because they had 2 herbs from Asia that are just fantastic for helping you get your cholesterol. So my specialist would always say, oh, if you don't take this drug, you're going to die. Well, that was like 13 years ago or something, right? So I'm still here. And, finally I found the right mixture of herbs. And it's like, he just looks at me and goes, yeah, your cholesterol's fine. Heretic.
You need a remedy for that because, well, you get told your cholesterol's bad, you get told your blood pressure's bad, but when you actually Google it, it's not really that bad. Everybody else has got the same, so
yeah. Well, by and large, they just moved the bar.
Just because I'm bigger and you're thinner, we've got the same blood pressure. Wow, it doesn't make no difference.
I know a senior that had blood pressure that could almost make my eyeballs pop out for as long as I've known her. And she's still kicking. If I'm half that tough when I'm her age, I'll be doing okay. And nothing slows her down. So by and large, it's just a number. And everybody's a little bit different, and the numbers can change this. But yeah, okay, I can see that we work on issues and such like that, but they keep moving the bar so that, what was normal maybe 10, 15 years ago is now a crisis, and you need more pills or this or that so they can make more profit. And do I trust them? Not in the slightest anymore. They've completely lost their credibility. If I meet a guy, who looks like a thug hiding in a dark corner on the street late at night, I'm probably more apt to trust him than I trust any physician or scientist or academic today, because at least he's honest about me. Here's a knife in your ribs, give me your money. Well, he's not lying, straight to the point, no pun intended. And these people, like chameleons, to lie, to manipulate, twist everything around. And basically, because most people know nothing, is you're just accepting it on blind trust that they're doing the right thing for you. And that's a terrible shame. It's the worst kind of murder.
The secret sign, George?
Is that a secret sign? Most likely. I forget now from my Masonic handbook that I used to look at for those.
Native Americans used to use that as a symbol for the forked tongue, which they were dealing with all the time with these colonial masters, the forked tongue. They lied, and they didn't do anything but lie.
Correct. One of my favorite sayings from the old Westerns, white men speak with forked tongue, because they lied in all the treaties, all the agreements to a society where honor meant something. It was a blood oath that you gave when you gave your word. You would prefer to die than to break your troth with whoever you gave your word to. And that was something symbolized in ancient times with the knights. You gave your word. And then because of this lust and power and money and all this sort of thing, they never tell the truth. They always break their word. And slowly Russia's figuring this out with the Minsk Accords that, they promise, oh yeah, we promise, here's this treaty, we're going to all make lovey-dovey. They came in there full well knowing that they were going to lie to and manipulate everything to cause a war that has killed, maybe a good million Ukrainians, devastated the country, turned it into ruin in many, many places. And for what? That's all Russia asks for is be neutral. That's such a big thing. They didn't want to take all your territory. They don't want your money. They don't want your women. It's just like, just be neutral. Well, what's wrong with that? You got your cake and you eat it too. So just because Ukraine chose Russia for a giant contract instead of the European Union, you're going to level the country to dust and kill 1 million people? Who's nuts?
Well,
yeah,
made us all go quiet, didn't it, that one?
Well, hopefully the big thing is we speak for the dead, the people, because maybe you believe the lies and you went to the front. Or the other one, if I speak out against October the 7th, part of it is I'm speaking out for the Israeli people who were killed by their own government, because I knew that very close to the beginning. And they were murdered by their own government. I happened to hear an Israeli public radio broadcast where one of the victims for one of these kibbutzes came on the radio, said it was an Israeli tank, shot her house. They took the picture, put it all over the world to say it was blown up by Hamas. It's got a giant hole in the wall from the tank round. And the reason it caught fire is because the gas wasn't turned off. And they murdered her husband and the people that were in the house. And now there's actually video from the air that you can see this tank fire 2 rounds at this house. And just recently, the former defense minister, Gallant, was on Channel 12 in Israel saying, I gave the orders for the Hannibal Directive to kill our own people. And I'm paraphrasing, not speaking directly as a quote. But he gave the orders. Okay? It's not news in any of the corporate media. So this is it. The helicopter gunship videos were released in Israel. And I had a Jewish speaking man listen to them to make sure the translations were correct. They shot their own people. And it was in their media in several of the major newspapers and probably more in Israel. And they come in low out of the rising sun and with 30 millimeter cannons, just boop, 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 and you can watch people explode and go to paradise. It wasn't Hamas. They did it. And then they blame it on Hamas so they can steal their land. And the biggest thing they want to steal is the offshore gas reserves. That's a big question. Was settled sort of in 2010 with Lebanon. And I think Blinken was even involved in that one. That we'll leave you alone. We'll give you our country. And you sign over your gas reserves to Israel. And they said, Fangula. Not going to happen. But that's still what they want. And that's what they've always wanted. Gold, oil, drugs, and you can add gas to the oil. Fight over money, wealth, power. It's a terrible thing, but that's the way the world works. And then they make up an enemy, have a false flag attack. Same old, same old. When you know the pattern, it's like Maxwell Smart from Get Smart. It's just like, oh, that's the old, false flag of this or that trick. That's the third time I fell for that this decade. Don't fall for it.
Amazing the MO that they use. I watched a very insightful video about the origin of these demons, and the Amalekites, which means the blood lickers, they were neighbors of the Israelites, and they ended up migrating north. They ended up founding the state of Khazaria, and the Khazarians eventually converted to Judaism to conceal their Baal worship. And the travelers that would come through Khazaria, these Khazarian bandits, would abduct them and steal from them, murder them, and then masquerade as the murder victims and return to the homeland of these murdered victims as the actual people that had been murdered. They'd play these games of masquerade, and this would be repeated as a kind of MO historically over and over and over again. And they became such masters of disguise that they would infiltrate other empires under disguise. And so now we can understand, where does the word czar come from? Khazar. Where does the word Kaiser come from? Khazar. Where does the word Caesar come from? Khazar. They're all Khazarian. So the black nobility of Europe is Khazarian. They're demon worshiping, devil worshiping, Baal worshiping monsters of no scruple, no conscience. And this is the bane of our existence. And unfortunately, they've taken control of the Holy Land as God's chosen people when they are, if anything, chosen by Lucifer. They're a demon worshiping horde. And it's very, very sad to see how much control they have exerted over other countries and world affairs. And one of the families of these monsters, the Rothschilds, controls, it's estimated, $9 trillion, and they've exerted control over most national banks, and they run these revenue agencies like the IRS and the CRA. And it's not a federal revenue agency, it just masquerades as such. And our hard-earned money is stolen from us, and they're banking it in offshore accounts in Puerto Rico. And this money that we make through our hard-earned effort is just being siphoned off by these the Rothschilds. I remember being in a legal office, and the Jewish lawyer said to my comments about the Rothschilds, well, they're Jews, aren't they? I said, no, they're not. Their real name was Bauer, and they changed their name to Rothschild because of the red seal on the door of their accounting office in Frankfurt, which was the 6-pointed hexagram star, which represents in geometric terms the number of the beasts. 6 sides, 6 triangles, and 6 points, 666. There you go. So he immediately got out his phone and started to do some research on the Rothschilds. Oh, it's just, anyway, they're a Jesuit banking establishment family. And the reason they were chosen by the Jesuits as a banking family for the church was that no one would assume it to be real because of their supposed Jewish identity. They're not Jews. They are not. They're Khazarian.
Well, that's in your Bible too.
What's that?
That's in the Bible too. It's
Indeed.
in Revelation. The Jews that are not Jews.
Indeed. So they call themselves Jews. They are not. They are the synagogue of Satan. Yes, Revelation 9, I believe. Chapter 9, verse 11.
Indeed. So is this about an hour we're supposed to do or we're going further?
Is there anything to wrap up with, Tim? Anything you wanted to get out of there?
Well, I just got an interview in at 3, so I got to get warmed up for that. But thanks for being on with us, George. It's good to be back on the saddle with you. Riding high.
Oh, indeed. Like I say, it was fate and probably a little bit of God's blessing that put us on an intersection course. And I'd have to say I'm very, very happy that happened, because who knows what evil we have slain somewhere along the path. That the big thing is we don't know who's heard our words and what effect they've had. I'm a big believer in the butterfly effect. And we may have started a lot of people flapping their wings and creating little storms here and there to have effect. And maybe what we're seeing now is a culmination of some of those words being heard by people who have influence today, and they can kind of correct things to take us away from destruction or financial collapse. I'd hate to see either one unfold personally. And just as a little reminder to people, and since Tim is quite the scholar in Shakespearean works, is remember what book the Doge comes from, The Merchant of Venice. He was the big financial arbitrator of the Venetian banking empire. And now we have a Doge again. And are they representing the Venetian financial empire resurrected from some sort of grave.
Yeah, and think about Venice and Venetian and how close it sounds to Phoenician, and realize that the Phoenicians found in London, as in London, England, and there is archaeological evidence to support that. And by the way, the British imperial system of measures is based on the Phoenician and Egyptian land and time measures. So the word inch is derived from Enoch, and the word yard is derived from his son Yared. And who were Enoch and Yared? The founders of land and time measures. As early Hebrew patriarchs, they were extremely influential.
Okay.
Indeed.
It was a good show, and thanks to you both kindly.